Hello, welcome back to Hin Heart. Today's story is new, fully fictional, and I promise you, if you've ever been underestimated in your own family, you're going to feel every second of this. I gave my stepdad a Father's Day gift in front of everyone. He smiled like he'd won. He even shook the box like a kid. But 5 minutes later, the room went silent in a way I'll never forget. And stay till the end, because the twist that followed didn't just shock him. It changed what family meant to all of us. Because the gift wasn't a watch, it wasn't cologne, it wasn't a tie. It was the moment he finally learned. You can't humiliate a child, drain an older woman's savings, and hide behind the word family forever. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he did to my son before I even understood what was happening to my mother. My name is Roxanna Bush. I'm 34, and I'm a major in the military. I'm the kind of person who plans everything, because if you don't plan, people get hurt. I've spent years learning how to stay calm when everything is loud, how to read patterns, how to separate emotion from facts without becoming cold. And still, I missed the pattern in my own home until my son paid the price. Levi is 8. He's quiet in a way that isn't shy, more like thoughtful. He builds model planes at the kitchen table like he's assembling a secret world nobody else can see. He reads too far above his age, and he has this soft, careful voice that makes adults lean in when he talks. His father, Toby, disappeared the moment he learned I was pregnant. No fight, no argument, just gone. I didn't chase him because I didn't want Levi to grow up watching me beg for love from someone who didn't have any to give. So it was me and Levi, and for a long time that was enough. Hard, yes, but clean, honest, predictable. The one person I trusted completely was my mother, Tipton. She's 66, the kind of woman who saves every receipt just in case, keeps her curtains ironed, and still writes birthdays in a paper calendar like it's sacred. She spent decades working, building a quiet life with careful habits. No drama, no big risks, no sudden moves. She owned her little house free and clear. She had savings. She had routine. What she didn't have was company. When I got deployed for long training cycles, Neen was my anchor. And because I'm a single parent in uniform, I had a family care plan, legal paperwork nomming who would care for Levi if I was pulled away fast. Neen was that person. She loved Levi. Levi loved her. It worked. That's why what happened next terrified me, not just as a mother, but as someone whose entire career could collapse if Levi wasn't safe and stable. 3 years ago, my mother met Vernon Tipton at a church picnic. He was charming in a way that looked gentle from far away. He carried folding chairs, offered to fix a loose porch step, called my mother darling, like he'd been saying it for years. Neen hadn't dated much after my dad died, so when Vernon showed up acting steady and helpful, she didn't question it the way I would have. They married fast, too fast. I had concerns, but I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to be the daughter who punishes her mother for wanting love. I told myself, he's older, he's polite, he's church-going. Maybe I'm just being guarded. For the first few months, Vernon treated me like a guest he wanted to impress. He called me Major Bush like it was a compliment and a warning at the same time. He shook Levi's hand like Levi was applying for a loan. Then the comments started, small at first, like little cuts you don't notice until you see the blood later. He needs tougher rules. He's too sensitive. Boys should act like boys. Vernon had a daughter, Courtney Hale, and a granddaughter, Kinley. Kinley was 6 at the time, and Vernon acted like she was perfect because she shared his blood. Kinley spilled juice. Awa, sweet thing. Levi dropped a napkin. Careless. Every family gathering became a lesson in who mattered most. Kinley got gifts and praise. Levi got correction and side-eye. I told myself Levi wasn't noticing. I was wrong. And here's the moment that changed everything. Father's Day wasn't the first line Vernon crossed. It started months earlier at a holiday dinner at my mother's house. Everyone was there. Neen, Vernon, Courtney, her husband Travis, Kinley, and me with Levi. The kitchen smelled like warm bread and roasted turkey, and for a second I thought we might have a normal night. We were halfway through serving plates when Vernon looked at Levi and said, calmly, like he was talking about a dirty dish, "The main table is for family. He can sit over there." He pointed to a little folding table pushed near the wall, not set nicely, not decorated, just there, like a place you put extra cups. Levi froze. He looked at me with eyes that were already trying not to cry. I didn't see it coming. I truly didn't. Not because Vernon had been kind. He hadn't. But because I never thought an adult would humiliate a child that openly while everyone else watched. Neen didn't speak. Courtney didn't speak. Travis didn't speak. And Levi, my sweet, careful Levi, picked up his plate without making a scene and walked to that folding table like he had practiced being excluded. I stayed at the main table. I hate admitting that. I hate it because it makes me feel like I failed him. But the truth is, I froze the way people freeze when something is so wrong your brain searches for a way it can't be real. That night, driving home, Levi fell asleep in the back seat. His cheeks were still damp. He tried to hide it from me, but kids don't know how to hide sadness from a mother who watches everything. I gripped the steering wheel, so tight my fingers ached. And I promised myself it would never happen again. But that wasn't the worst part. Because humiliation was only the surface. Under it, Vernon was doing something much more dangerous, something that could destroy my mother's life and my son's stability at the same time. A few weeks after that dinner, I had to leave for an extended training exercise. Levi stayed with Neen, as always. I didn't like leaving him with Vernon in the house, but I convinced myself Neen would protect him. She promised she would. When I picked Levi up, he was different. Not dramatic, just smaller, quieter, like he had folded himself inward to take up less space. I asked about his week. "Fine," he said. That word, fine, from an 8-year-old is never fine. I asked if he worked on his model plane kit, the one he'd been begging for, the one I bought him after weeks of good grades and good manners. Levi hesitated. Then he said, almost whispering, "It's gone." I asked what he meant. He told me Vernon threw it away. Not because Levi broke it, not because it was dangerous, not because it was inappropriate. Because Levi left a few tiny pieces on the table while he went to wash his hands. That night, I called my mother. I expected her to be furious. I expected her to defend Levi. Instead, she sounded tired. She said, "Vernon was just trying to teach responsibility." I waited for her to laugh like it was absurd. She didn't. I said, "Mom, he threw away something my child loved to punish him. That's not discipline. That's control." Neen got quiet, the kind of quiet that says she knows you're right, but she can't afford to agree out loud. Then another thing happened, something that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't shake. A neighbor I'd known for years, Barbara Panic, called me one evening. She sounded awkward, like she was afraid she was stepping into something messy. She said, "Roxanna, I think you should know what Vernon been saying." At church, Vernon had been telling people Levi was troubled, from a broken home, and that Vernon was trying to straighten him out. Straighten him out. Like Levi was a crooked nail. Like my son was a problem Vernon was volunteering to fix, while I was painted as a mother who couldn't manage her own child. I drove to Neen's house the next day without calling. Vernon was sprawled in his recliner like he owned the air. I didn't even look at him. I went straight to the kitchen and asked my mother to talk alone. I told her calmly, "One more time, one more comment about my son, one more humiliation, and I will stop being polite." Neen started crying. She told me I was being harsh. Then she said the sentence that landed like a door slamming. "He's my husband, Roxanna. Not Levi is my grandson, not you're my daughter. Just husband." I went home feeling like I'd lost something I didn't realize could be taken from me. That night, Levi sat on his bed in pajamas, staring at his hands. He said, "Mom, I don't want to go to Grandma anymore." I asked why. He swallowed hard and said, "Vernon said real boys don't play with planes. He said I'm a baby. He said I don't belong at the table because I'm not really family." And there it was, the poison. Not shouted, not dramatic, just dropped into a child's heart like it would grow there. I hugged Levi and told him he belonged anywhere I stood. I told him he was smart and creative, and he didn't need Vernon's approval to be a real boy. But after he fell asleep, I sat alone at my table and felt something cold settle in my chest. Because now it wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, legal. My family care plan depended on Neen. If Levi couldn't stay there safely, I had a problem bigger than hurt feelings. And while I was trying to solve that, Vernon was emptying my mother's life from the inside out. I found out by accident. It was tax season. Neen asked me to help her organize her paperwork like I did every year. Vernon conveniently ran errands so we could work. Neen logged into her account, and I looked at the balance. It didn't make sense. The savings Neen had built for decades, her safety net, was nearly gone. Not low, not reduced, nearly gone. I asked her gently, "Mom, where did it go?" She started nomming things like she was reciting excuses she had rehearsed. Vernon bought a small fishing boat. Vernon bought a new riding mower. Vernon invested in equipment. Vernon needed tools. Vernon needed repairs. Vernon needed upgrades. Every sentence was, Vernon needed. My mother didn't need any of it. She looked embarrassed, like she had been caught doing something wrong, even though she was the one being drained. I asked if Vernon had his own account. She said, he said it was easier if everything was together. That's when I felt it, like recognizing a familiar threat pattern. Not because I'd seen it in war, because I'd seen it in people who win by choosing targets who are too kind to fight back. That day when I got home, I didn't scream. I didn't call Vernon. I didn't drive over and cause a scene. I opened my laptop and did what I always do when something feels off. I started building a timeline. What happened next changed everything. I checked public records. I checked property filings. I checked anything that didn't require permission, because facts don't care if someone is charming. And then I found it. Vernon's name was on my mother's house deed. My mother's house, the one she paid off with decades of careful work, the one that was supposed to be hers until she died, then passed to me, then to Levi. Vernon had convinced her to add him for protection. Protection. From what? From her own daughter, from her own grandson. The word tasted like rust. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed to understand how deep it went. I kept digging. I learned Vernon had a work history that didn't match the story he told. He wasn't the retired executive he claimed to be. His job had ended under circumstances he didn't talk about. Then I found something else, an old divorce record from another state. Vernon's first wife, Donna Jessup. I hesitated before calling her because I didn't want to be the person digging up old pain. But something told me Donna was the missing piece. When she answered, she sounded tired in a way that comes from having fought too long. I told her who I was. I told her I was married into Vernon's life through my mother. I asked one question. Did he do this to you too? Donna didn't even pause. She said, yes. Then she described it like she was reading from the same script I was living. Charming entrance, quick marriage, moving into her home, taking over finances, spending her money, making her son feel small, turning family against each other. And when she finally confronted him, he acted like she was ungrateful, like she owed him for helping. Donna said something that hit me so hard, I had to put the phone down for a second. He doesn't stop until there's nothing left. I didn't see it coming, but suddenly I could see everything. The cruelty toward Levi wasn't random. It was strategy. If Vernon could push Levi away, I'd stop sending Levi to Neen. If I stopped sending Levi, I'd stop visiting. If I stopped visiting, no one would watch Neen's accounts or question paperwork. Levi wasn't just being bullied. He was being used as a lever. That night, I sat at my table with my notes and realized something about myself. I had been trying to protect peace, but peace was never offered to my son. So I stopped playing defense. I called a lawyer, not to ruin Vernon, not to do anything dramatic, just to learn what options existed when an older adult's finances were being exploited. The attorney, Terry Aarons, listened quietly, then said, "If your mother is over 65 and money is being taken through manipulation or deception, there are legal protections. But we need evidence, and we need your mother's statement." So I built evidence. I didn't guess, I didn't assume. I verified. Bank withdrawals matched purchases, receipts when I could find them, statements Neen had printed and tucked away. Social media posts Vernon made bragging about living the good life, with dates that lined up with money leaving her account. I made a clean timeline. What, when, how much, where it came from. The number was sickening. And I still wasn't ready for the next part. Because when I finally asked Neen, gently, privately, if she had copies of anything, she didn't look surprised. She went down the hallway and came back with a shoebox. Inside were receipts, notes, circled bank printouts, a list written on the back of a church program. My mother had been tracking the damage quietly for over a year. She hadn't confronted Vernon because she was ashamed. She whispered, "I didn't want to be the old woman who got tricked." I took her hands and told her the truth. "You're not tricked, you're waking up, and you kept proof." We sat there crying, not because we were weak, but because we were finally done pretending. Then I asked her a question that mattered more than anything. "Do you want him gone?" Neen nodded. But she looked terrified. And I understood why. Because once you admit someone you let into your home is dangerous, you have to accept you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending. Still, she said, "What do we do?" I told her, "We do this smart. We do this legal. We do this in a way that protects you and Levi." We made a plan. First, Neen would quietly open a new account in her name only and redirect her income there. No confrontation, no announcement. Second, she would gather her personal documents, birth certificate, identification, property records, into a locked folder outside the house, in case Vernon tried to withhold them. Third, we would file a formal report with the appropriate authorities using our evidence package. Fourth, I would update my family care plan immediately. Levi would not stay in that home again unless Vernon was out. I arranged a backup caregiver through a trusted friend from my unit, just in case. And then came the part that still makes my skin prickle when I remember it. Vernon started accelerating, like he sensed resistance in the air. One evening, Neen called me, voice shaking, and said Vernon brought home paperwork. He wanted her to sign for a new joint investment account. He claimed it was for her future. He wanted her remaining savings moved there. He wanted her monthly income to deposit there. He wanted the last of her independence in his hands. Neen said, "Something doesn't feel right." I said, "Do not sign anything. Tell him you want to pray on it. Tell him you're tired. Tell him anything, just don't sign." She promised she wouldn't. 2 days later, Courtney called me. Her voice was sugary. She told me they were planning a small Father's Day lunch for Vernon at Neen's house. "Just family," she said. Then she listed names: Vernon, Neen, Courtney, Travis, Kinley. No Roxanna, no Levi. She had the nerve to exclude me from my own mother's home, again. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in my car for a long time, staring at nothing, breathing like I was trying not to break a glass wall with my bare hands. Because I could have exploded. I could have gone full confrontation, full volume, full war. But I remembered something important. The best consequences are the ones built on proof, not emotion. So I told Neen, "We're going, we're attending, and we're bringing your paperwork." She asked, "Why would we go?" I said, "Because I want him comfortable. I want him thinking he's in control, and I want you safe when the next steps happen." Neen didn't fully understand yet. Levi didn't either. But I told Levi we were going to Grandma's for lunch, and he looked nervous. I promised him something I had never promised before. "You will not be treated like that again, not once." Father's Day arrived hot and bright, the kind of day that makes everything look normal from the outside. We drove to Neen's house with a wrapped gift in my lap. Levi held a small bag of cookies he baked with me that morning, because Levi is the kind of child who still believes kindness is the default. When we walked in, Courtney's smile tightened. Vernon's face did that thing where it looks friendly, but the eyes don't match. Vernon looked at Levi, then looked at me and said, "Well, you decided to show." I said, "It's Father's Day, of course we did." He didn't like that answer. Lunch started with fake laughter. Kinley ran around like she owned the house. Travis scrolled his phone like he was waiting for it to end. Courtney played hostess like my mother's kitchen was her stage. And Vernon played king. At one point, Levi moved toward the main table, and Vernon's hand shot out, stopping him like a gate. "Kids eat over there," Vernon said, pointing to, of course, another smaller table. Levi's face fell. I looked at Vernon and said clearly, "Levi eats with me." The room froze. Courtney opened her mouth like she was going to correct me, but I didn't let her. I pulled out a chair at the main table and sat Levi down beside me. Vernon's jaw tightened. He smiled anyway, the way men smile when they're deciding how to punish you later. But I wasn't afraid of later anymore. Because I wasn't here to beg for respect. I was here to deliver consequences. After lunch, Courtney clapped her hands and announced it was time for gifts. She handed Vernon a few things: tools, a mug, a shirt. Vernon opened them like a man who expects tribute. Then she looked at me, surprised, like she didn't think I'd bring anything. I stood and held out the wrapped box. Vernon's eyes lit up. That's the part I still remember, how quickly greed can look like joy. He took it and said, loud enough for everyone, "Now this is what I'm talking about, some respect." He shook the box once, smiled, and started tearing paper. Inside was a plain folder. His smile flickered, confused. He opened it, and the color drained from his face, so fast it was like someone turned off a light behind his skin. Courtney leaned forward. "What is that?" Vernon's hands trembled. He tried to close the folder like he could close reality. But I spoke first, calm, controlled. "That," I said, "is a notice of legal action, a request for protective measures and documentation of financial exploitation. Everything you took from Neen is documented. Every purchase, every withdrawal, every signature you pressured her into, every lie you used to isolate her." Neen's hands were shaking. Levi stared at his cookie bag like he wanted to disappear. Vernon's voice cracked. This is ridiculous." I looked at him and said, "It's organized." And that's when the real twist landed. Because the folder wasn't the entire gift. The real gift was what Neen did next. She stood up, walked to the hallway table, and pulled out another envelope, one she had prepared in secret. She faced Vernon and said, voice trembling but clear, "I'm filing for divorce. You are not staying in my home, and you are not touching my accounts again." Courtney gasped like she'd been slapped. Travis finally looked up from his phone. Kinley stopped running, confused by the adult's sudden seriousness. Vernon stared at Neen like he couldn't comprehend that a woman he had been draining could still stand. Then he turned to me, eyes sharp, and hissed, "You did this." I said, "No, you did this. We just stopped you." Vernon tried to laugh. He tried to act like it was all overreaction, all misunderstanding. But that wasn't the worst part. Because as he stood there trying to regain control, Neen said something that made him flinch. "I found the papers," she said quietly. "The ones you hid, the ones about transferring the house." Vernon blinked. "What are you talking about?" And Neen, bless her, pulled out copies. Vernon had been preparing additional paperwork, steps to tighten his hold on the home beyond just being on the deed. He hadn't just taken money. He was preparing to take her future. And now he knew we knew. For a second, he looked like he might explode. Not with violence, just with that ugly kind of rage that comes when manipulation stops working. He pointed at Levi and said, "This is your fault too, if you weren't such a..." I stepped forward so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Don't," I said low, "say another word." The room was dead silent. Vernon's eyes darted around. Courtney looked panicked. Travis looked trapped. Neen looked like she was holding herself together by pure will. Levi's small hand slid into mine under the table. Then there was a knock at the front door. Not the friendly kind, not the neighborly kind. The kind that carries weight. Courtney's face went pale. She whispered, "Who is that?" I didn't answer. Neen didn't answer. Vernon's throat moved like he was swallowing something sharp. I walked to the door and opened it. Two officials stood there, professional, calm, holding paperwork. One asked, "Is Vernon Tipton inside?" Vernon tried to step back, like distance could undo what was already set in motion. Neen stood beside me and said, "Yes." And that was the moment the power finally switched sides. I won't dramatize what followed. This wasn't a movie scene. It was paperwork, procedure, and a man realizing that charm doesn't work on evidence. They informed Vernon. He was required to come with them for questioning and processing, related to a report filed for exploitation of an older adult and property deception. Courtney started crying, not because she felt sorry for Neen, but because she was realizing the story she'd been protecting was collapsing in public. Vernon looked at Courtney like she was his escape hatch. "Call someone, handle this." Courtney froze. And that was another twist I didn't expect. Because Courtney, who always defended her father, looked at him and didn't move. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't jump to fix it. She just stared at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Later, I learned Donna Jessup had spoken to Courtney after receiving a message from our side. Just the truth, no threats, no insults. Donna told Courtney exactly what Vernon had done to her years ago, how he followed the same pattern, how he always needed a new woman to fund his new life. Courtney's loyalty cracked under the weight of repetition. Vernon left the house that day without his recliner, without his boat, without his family table. And Neen closed the door behind him with hands that were shaking, but with relief in her eyes. After that day, the process moved like slow thunder. Court dates, legal meetings, formal statements, more documentation. But we had two things Vernon never expected from women he targeted: organization and endurance. Neen's shoebox receipts supported my timeline. Donna Jessup's statement supported pattern. Even Barbara Panic's report about church rumors supported intent to isolate and control perceptions. The deed issue was addressed through civil proceedings. Because Neen's consent had been shaped by deception and pressure, legal action was taken to restore the home to her name alone. The financial damage wasn't magically undone, but restitution was ordered as part of the outcome, and assets purchased using Neen's funds were seized or sold. The boat Vernon bragged about, gone. The unnecessary equipment, gone. Neen's piece came back in pieces. The first piece was silence in her own living room, real silence, not the tense kind that existed around Vernon. The second piece was sleeping, without fear of being pressured into signing something. The third piece was watching Levi sit at her kitchen table again, without someone measuring whether he deserved the chair. And Levi changed too. At first, he was cautious, like he expected kindness to be taken back. He asked permission before speaking. He tried to clean up obsessively after himself, terrified that something he loved would be thrown away again. That broke me, because no child should learn love is conditional on being perfect. So we rebuilt, slowly, intentionally. Neen bought Levi a new model kit, not the same one, but a better one. She sat with him and asked him to explain every part, like she was learning his world. One afternoon, I looked through her kitchen window and saw them bent over the table together, carefully aligning tiny pieces, laughing softly when a part didn't fit. And I felt something unclench inside me. Because justice isn't just someone facing consequences. Justice is what grows in the space where control used to live. I updated my family care plan with full confidence again, not because I won, but because Levi was safe. That was the real mission. Neen separated her accounts, froze new joint openings, and met with a financial advisor on her own terms. She learned to say no without apologizing. And me, I learned something I wish I had learned earlier. Staying quiet doesn't keep peace. It just gives the loudest person more room. Months later, I received career news I'd been working toward. A selection I wasn't sure I'd still qualify for after all the instability. But when the dust settled, I realized something. I hadn't fallen apart. I had adapted. I had protected my child, stabilized my family, and handled pressure without letting it destroy me. One evening, Levi asked me, "Mom, why did Vernon hate me?" I told him the truth in a way an 8-year-old could carry without it becoming a scar. "He didn't hate you," I said. "He hated that you were loved. People like that don't want love in the room unless it belongs to them." Levi thought about it and said, "So he was jealous." I nodded. "Yes, and insecure and greedy, but that was never about you." Levi leaned against me and whispered, "I like Grandma's house again." And Neen, standing in the doorway, heard him. Her eyes filled. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Because the home she built wasn't just bricks. It was belonging. If you take anything from this story, take this. You don't owe loyalty to someone who harms your child. You don't owe silence to someone who steals peace. And you don't owe keeping the family together when the family is built on one person being crushed. Sometimes the smartest revenge is simply telling the truth with proof, letting the system do its job, and rebuilding a life that can't be manipulated again. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs courage right now. And comment below, what would you have done the moment Vernon tried to send Levi to the corner table? I read the comments, and I'll see you in the next story.